Hello and welcome to World Talks. I'm Diana Skaya. It's another dramatic turn in global politics. Donald Trump's administration is putting pressure on Kyiv, halting military aid and signaling a shift in U.S. policy towards Ukraine and potentially paving the way for a deal with the Kremlin. With American support now uncertain, the big question is, can Ukraine defend itself without it? And if the U.S. fully pulls back, is Europe prepared to step up? Joining me now to break it all down is Sarah Ashton-Cirillo, former Sergeant, Defense Intelligence of Ukraine. Ashton, so good to have you here on World Talks this morning.
As usual, a very good morning and hearty hello to the people of Poland and those watching TVP World around the world. Thank you for your support of freedom, not just in the last days, but since the entire full-scale invasion by Russia of Ukraine began.
This is such a warm welcome. Ashton, I mean, a lot happened also, honestly, in the past 24 hours, and many headlines as of this morning writing that the United States and Ukraine are signaling they're ready for a peace deal. This is after Donald Trump's speech at the Congress, a 100-minute speech at the Congress last night. Before we move on to the rest, what is your take on that?
It was very similar to what we saw in Munich when J.D. Vance addressed the audience there, and some of the different American speakers addressed the audience at the security conference. Everything that's coming out of D.C. right now is focused internally. And I always tell our foreign partners, no need to get worried, because all President Trump and the rest of the administration is doing is signaling to their base that they haven't forgotten them and that they are not going to forget them. But President Trump's base is not focused necessarily on foreign policy, and that's why we can't look at his words spoken on domestic issues and other issues that may seem concerning to the partnerships in NATO and the United Nations and elsewhere as being anything but words to his direct voters in the MAGA movement.
Ashton, let me ask you this. I have a quote here from yesterday evening from Donald Trump saying, "We've had serious discussions with Russia and have received strong signals that they are ready for peace." This is what he said regarding the process of ending the war in Ukraine. Now, I mean, again, serious discussions with Russia. What do you think those discussions entail? Because I don't feel like we have a lot of details here. And once again, is this being done on the hush, again, without Ukraine? And I mean, you know, a lot of experts say that he has just been giving in to Putin's demands. What's your comment on this?
I'm going to start off by saying that Putin is a murderer, he's a liar, and he's the head not of a country, but a criminal cabal. And many, many people in the United States of America understand this. I believe President Trump understands this as well. So he, again, is giving lip service. He's throwing out feelers, but there is no sense that President Trump truly believes that Vladimir Putin is somebody who can make a deal. He will be forced to make a deal by Ukraine and the United States and European nations led by Poland. But anything that comes before that, President Trump has been on the receiving end of Putin's lies before, specifically in an area that we've talked about a few months ago, which was on the mid-range ballistic missiles, where President Trump had to order the United States being pulled out of that ballistic missile treaty during his first term because they knew Putin was lying.
Ashton, I want to take you, though, through, I mean, you did say, you know, in your previous discussions here on TVP World, in an interview you gave to us about 2 months ago, you said, and I'm going to quote it, okay?
Please.
POTUS has shown that he is masterful in keeping his enemies on guard, making sure that they don't know what's coming next. And so far, anyone to think that POTUS is going to hand over American interests to any of our enemies and the common enemies of the United States, Ukraine, and Poland, they're awfully mistaken. I look forward to January 20th. Biden's administration showed its weakness, and Trump is not weak. But I mean, I'm going to ask you this question again. Don't you think that everything that's been going on and what happened in the Oval Office between Zelensky and Trump and J.D. Vance last Friday at the Oval Office, isn't it again Trump giving in to, giving all the four ace cards to Vladimir Putin? I mean, not once have we heard Trump, call out Russia a war criminal.
Ultimately, that's not President Trump's style, and I do appreciate you playing that. And I'm going to just make this statement. I hope that the words I spoke to TVP World do come to fruition. While President Trump has not directly attacked the Kremlin, those around him have, especially leadership in the Congress. Speaker Johnson stated very clearly that Russia was the aggressor, Russia was the enemy in this case. And so while I have eaten a bit of humble pie and taken a lot of criticism, we still have not seen anything, quote, given to Russia. In fact, a few days ago, the Trump administration increased sanctions, or I should say extended, not increased, extended sanctions against the Russian enemy. So what I always tell anyone who's asking me about this, it is a very disconcerting time. But until we see Ukraine handed over to anyone, and Ukraine will not be handed over to anyone, especially the Russian enemy, let's see what unfolds. While I was very helpful, I still am waiting to see the final agreements being signed for a just peace on behalf of Ukraine.
Why has Trump frozen all this aid to Ukraine, Ashton? Military aid to Ukraine.
I think it goes back to 2019. The president is a man who has a long memory. And in 2019, due to issues surrounding Ukraine, not the fault of President Zelensky, President Trump was impeached. And this is a historical fact. It's a reality that took place. And I think he carries this along with what he calls the Russia hoax from the investigation by Special Investigator Mueller. He carries that with him. And so it's a very personal issue. And I believe that's why, in a way that hurt too many people by cutting off the aid. Don't get me wrong. It is something that's stunning and wrong. However, that's where I believe it comes from.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says that Europe must step up its response to the situation. Now, Ashton, do you think that Europe is ready to take this lead in supporting Ukraine and ensuring regional security, and if I may say, alone and without American help?
I believe morally and from the point and vantage point of doing what's necessary from a moral standpoint, Europe is there. Do I believe every country is as strong as, say, Poland and willing to put the spending where it's necessary? That's to remain to be seen. We already saw where there were some discussions over whether there would be peacekeeping troops sent in. More importantly, let's see Europe go ahead and release that $300 billion in frozen Russian funds. And that would send the strongest message, not just to Vlad Putin, not just to the Ayatollah's regime, but to the United States, and saying once and for all, whatever you're saying about us is simply wrong. We've just handed over $300 billion to Ukraine. Let's get started on this road to victory and stop with these pauses.
And just to link to this question previously, Ukraine in the past, of course, 3 years has significantly expanded its defense industry. But now the big question is here, how long would you say Ukraine would be able to hold out without U.S. support?
We've seen it in the past. We went 6 months when I was actively serving. I was serving as recently as 3-4 weeks ago in the military. So we saw in April of 2024, when there were big celebrations, that the $61 billion supplemental was reinstituted. We had a pause on shipments at that point, too, for 6 months. The Ukrainian fighters are not only the bravest fighters in the world, but some of the smartest. And so with current stockpiles and understanding that this was a possibility, we're looking at least half a year of being able to maintain our battle readiness at the same standard it is right now. And that doesn't include any sort of increase by the Europeans or our other partners around the world.
NATO members have had different approaches to the war in Ukraine. Do you think that the U.S. decision to freeze this aid can create even deeper divisions among allies?
I think allies within the NATO organization have a lot to discuss. We're already seeing some interesting pushback from countries such as Hungary and Slovakia in the last months. Mm-hmm. Now the United States is pressing hard in several different directions within the organization. But let's get this correct. The organization has lasted 75 years. I was at the summit myself in July of 2024, honoring that 75th anniversary. It's brought in different countries along the way, including Poland, which has become one of the strongest members of not just NATO, but the European Union and global security as a whole. And so we're going to see friendships wax and wane, but never break. And I think that's what we're going to see with NATO. We're going to see a lot of pushing and pulling, but in the end, countries are going to stand together that have stood together for decades, if not longer.
Ashton, let me ask you this. I mean, what we saw, of course, was Zelensky apologizing to Trump. He gave him, that olive branch. He took the leap. How do you predict the next step will look like from Trump's end? I mean, and do you really think that this is the time that we're actually going to be able to see some kind of ceasefire or a peace deal? What do you predict?
Sure. President Zelensky not only wrote a very kind letter to the American people and to the Trump administration, or I should say a social media post, but it was a letter as well. He laid out grounds for the first steps towards a just peace. That includes stopping attacks on the Ukrainian infrastructure, prisoner of war swap for a prisoner of war stop, stopping the terrorism in the Black Sea, and I can go on and on. So President Zelensky didn't just put out that olive branch. He put out very strong, specific ideas on how to get towards that just peace while making sure the Ukrainian people were not sold out. And I think President Trump appreciates that. President Trump wanted to get a message across, again, not just to President Zelensky, but to the world, that he is the president of the world's lone superpower. The United States is the only superpower in the world today. And unfortunately, from a diplomatic standpoint, he did it in an unusual way, but he did it in the way President Trump feels comfortable, and very similar to ways he did in his first term.
Thank you so much, Sarah Ashton-Cirillo. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Former Sergeant of Defense Intelligence of Ukraine, thank you so much for all your insight and input on TVP World this morning.
Thank you.
And that's all for this edition of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm Diana Sky, but don't go away. News up next with Anya Kalczynska.